Hello, friends of Herbie. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Campfire Talks with Herbie. Tonight I have a guest, a very special guest for me, and I will jump right into introducing him. It is none other than Tom Cagley. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Steve, this is weird, right? Me being on this side of the desk versus you being on the interviewee side.
It's totally backwards. I don't know how this happened. Can
Well,
you
we can
maybe tell
flip.
the
We can
audience?
flip this funnel. So, I've been doing a podcast called the Software Process and Measurement Cast. That's why sometimes the name comes up as Spamcast, but I've been doing that for 14 years, and we were trying to figure this out when we were talking earlier, how many times you've actually been on the podcast. And I remember, I was actually telling my wife as we were driving the other day, and she'd go, "Oh, where did you meet this Steve Tendon guy?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I've seen pictures of him. I don't think I've ever physically seen him on the video, and we certainly never met physically." But it was back in 2014 when you first came on the podcast?
Yeah, that's it. I remember I was in a hot hotel room in Gibraltar, of all places, and
With
I
the
think you had
windows open.
yeah, you had lots of problem with the background noise there.
Well, that was episode 264. Last weekend,
Wow.
I published 601. You've been on the cast somewhere in the neighborhood of 14, 15 times at least. At one point, your first book, the Hyper book, the one that you did with Wolfram, we actually talked through every chapter one by one, which was sort of the mental genesis for the Reread Saturday stuff that I'm doing over on the blog at
Oh, I see.
WordPress.
Wow. I didn't know I was the root cause of that. So
Well,
what's all these
you've
reread?
actually root caused a number of things in my life. So
Okay, so I plead guilty. Whatever it is, it's what is the XP thing? It's Chet's fault, right? So I can replace Chet then.
yeah.
So what is this Reread Saturday? What are you doing?
Okay, so the podcast property is all audio, and a few videos that are now starting to float in. But the blog on every Saturday, I go through a piece of a book, and we've reread The Goal, we've reread Covey's 7 Habits, and a number of other books. And generally, it boils down to 1 to 2 chapters a week. I'll read it and put down my notes, my thoughts. Sometimes my editor, or the person who actually looks over my writing before it goes up, says, "Tom, you're a little bit more like a book report." It really depends on what I'm thinking. And what it does is most of the time I've read the book before, and it's time to just go through it really at a slow pace and force myself to actually think about the content in really, really grave detail. So we go through it and write down all the thoughts and the high points, and based on some of the work that I do as an independent consultant, here's how I've applied these kind of things. So I generally do a poll as a book gets close to being done the one before. And this time I said, you know what, instead of reading something that's old and everybody may have read before, let's reread something for me that is relatively new. So I picked 4 books, 3 of which were relatively new, past 6 months, and 1 that was old. And Tame Your Workflow came up as the number 1 by just 10 kilometers, right? It was just huge,
Wow.
swamped the boat kind of thing. So we're gonna start there and go through it
Great. So
right
the
now,
next
chapter by
reread,
chapter.
the next reread is Tame Your Workflow. right?
Absolutely. And in theory, we'll start this Saturday. I'm having computer problems, so it may not be this Saturday, but it would be chapter 1. We've done the front notes, the introductions, the forewords, that kind of stuff. Now it's time to dive into real content. And that will allow me to bug you and Daniel and
Yes.
say, I don't quite get this. Can you tell me a little bit more? Which will obviously be very useful to everybody in the TameFlow community.
And how do people interact with your rereading? Is it only through the comments on the blog, or some other way?
Comments on the blog right now.
Comments on the blog.
Comments on the blog. Yeah,
Okay.
I've given that I have a day job also, trying to be an independent consultant and go out there and sell. Running an interactive channel like Slack right now is a little bit beyond the capabilities.
Okay. Well, I would, of course, strongly suggest that we could use the TameFlow community for this. So if someone out there is curious to join the community, well, sorry, I got the wrong banner. Where is it? I got lost. There it is. No, I have to click on so many things here. I don't see where I'm heading.
I think you're doing a phenomenal job. This is a really, really great idea.
Right. It's like being the director of your own show, being the actor and backstage and everything. So it's fun. So I was suggesting that maybe we can use the community. So the readers who want to interact can join there. And Tom, I invite you to join the community as well. So
I will do that this afternoon.
Wonderful. Okay, so shall we maybe go into knowing you a little bit better? I always have like this ceremonial questions for my guests. So we know your name and what is your company and who are you in general?
Okay, well, who I am in general, I was born in a log cabin. No, I'm kidding. I know people have log cabins. Tom Cagley and Associates is the name of my firm. We have a couple of associates and a number of 1099s. We're independent consultants, and we focus on mostly on the agile side of the world, but again, most of the practice is, I would suggest, relatively non-denominational. It is much more process improvement focused. I like to say, if process improvement was a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?
Right.
And you know what? I think that's a fair question. So whether it's SAFe, TameFlow, Scrum, Kanban, XP, all of these frameworks and methods and techniques have some core truths to them that are applicable in organizations that have the right context and the right point of view. So that's how change happens, right? We learn and helping organizations get better. So that's what Tom Cagley and Associates do. As I said, I've been a blogger and a podcaster for a long time. I wrote a project management book, which interestingly enough, actually is roughly 6 years old, with a friend of mine from Mumbai, who I didn't physically meet until 5 years after we wrote the book. And but it's still selling, and it's on project management. Albeit I would write a different book now if we were to have approached it now. And so that's who I am. I came to this, right? I came to this whole measurement and process stuff. People like Capers Jones, who I worked for a period of time, was a great mentor. I actually spent a couple of months in Detroit the year before Deming died with Deming. I wasn't the only person in the room. There was like 20 or 30 others, but I got to spend 2 months with one of the most cantankerous human beings I've ever met in my life, who really hated it when hotels wouldn't let you wouldn't let you take the hangers off the hook. That's it. That's its own story. But again, one of those things that really frames your life. I was working for EDS at the time, and they had just been bought by GM. And I had to actually rent a car so I could go up there because I had a Japanese car. And you don't park at that point, didn't park a Japanese car in a GM lot and expect to have tires when you came back.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I looked it up, and I think your book is like this one, Mastering Software Project Management, and there's the URL on Amazon. So, Tom, you've been around quite a while. I mean, you mentioned Capper, Jones, and Deming. But when did you start to move into the agile space? And of course, then I mean, we already know how you've discovered TameFlow, but when did you get like
2002.
interested in TameFlow? Okay, 2002 for agile. What was the event?
You asked this question, so I knew it was coming, and I can't remember an absolutely explicit event other than sitting in a room with some very dear friends up in Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada, discussing the CMMI at the time and recognizing that the level of overhead that people were being asked to do to become, to adopt the CMMI was, at least the way they were approaching it was absurd, and that there had to be a different way. And that got me into a number of conversations with some of the original signers and some of the original, people that were thinking about Agile as it became new. So, I had a conversation with Mike Cohn, a conversation with Dean Leffingwell, and those sorts of folks. And that, again, that's another one of those, it changed their trajectory. But it was that meeting in Sherbrooke in the basement of a building, where you could look at people's face and they were saying, we're going to do this and we're going to check the box. And the answer is, it's just not going to be terribly productive. We'll do it because they really wanted the contract, but it wasn't because it was the right thing to do.
Okay. Yeah, I typically ask if you make a living out of this, but it's obvious that you are a seasoned professional in the field. So how then have you maybe used the ideas of TameFlow in your work? Have they been useful?
Yes, they have. And interestingly enough, the whole idea of throughput accounting and some of the earlier things from Tame, back from the Hyper book, the original book, the whole idea of the way you approach the discussion about Herbie and the way you translated the metaphor versus the way Goldratt had gone through it, I think has been very helpful. I've used that. I've actually trotted out the book and shown it to people. On occasion, I actually have that in my backpack. That was before I discovered that you could actually put whole books on these things.
You really impersonated Herbie with a backpack.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. And it's a heavy backpack.
Right.
And I go really slow. I try to get everybody to carry my stuff for
right. But they don't know about the 5 focusing steps, and nobody's helping you, right?
And
oh dear.
No, they don't. And those are the kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things that I think I've gotten, taken from the book as it affects things like lean and the idea of the theory of constraints. But again, I think more importantly, at least for my thought process now, the whole idea of throughput accounting and the approach to financial accounting summarizes and crystallizes some of my thoughts that I think are extremely powerful and help people, especially executives who you're trying to sell to, actually get them to a point where they can understand why it makes sense for them to champion change in the organization.
Okay. So give us a typical day in your life.
Typical is, okay, so it is typical. So somewhere between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning, I get my behind out of bed, which usually if I'm home, that makes my dog happy because by that point she's really interested in eating breakfast. And walk the
At
dog.
3 a.m.
And I get out on the road doing a jog every morning that it isn't raining. I'll run in the snow. I'll run in the sleet. I really don't like rain. But I'm out in the street about 4 o'clock in the morning, 7 to 10 miles generally, somewhere in that neighborhood. That's the start of the day. I used to run with headphones on and listen to things and listen to podcasts, and the battery on my phone is going. And when it's really cold in the winter, I live in sort of the northern tier of the United States, when it's 12, 13, 20 degrees Celsius below zero, the battery doesn't hold up as well. So I stopped doing it. I get roughly an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes a little longer, just clear time all by myself without having to worry about cars and bikes and dogs running out and trying to eat me. And you can have this great mental sort of dialogue in your head. That's sort of my meditation every morning.
Uh-huh.
That's how I start. And then it's time to do real work. You sit down, do some audio editing, write some on the blog, write some on the books, and work on my client stuff until it's early evening. Eat dinner, sometimes actually cook the dinner, and then spike the ball. Now, I'll be honest with you, get up at 3 in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock, whatever that number ends up being, because I don't set an alarm clock, you tend to go to bed relatively early, right? So,
of course.
somewhere around 9 or 10, it's lights out, and
So it
lights out.
seems you are in another time zone, actually, right?
Always in another time zone.
Or in another zone. Okay.
That's what people say.
So what makes you happy at the end of the day?
Making, and it's funny, I think this has been a common thread, because I've watched a number of these before, and it is making a difference in not only to my clients, but I'll be honest with you, this whole idea of blogging and podcasting on top of the, adding value to the clients, I have run into any number of people who have told me that I changed the trajectory of their career. So even though it's only serendipity that I actually run into them, I get a kick out of making people's life better.
Good, great. And in this long professional experience you had, what are the interesting skills or insights you've developed?
I am significantly better listener than I was many years ago. I have learned to ask questions and actually stop and listen to the answers versus trying to figure out the next question. That's not only an interviewer. I've not only gotten that, and it's helpful for interviewing, but it's helpful to actually finding out really what's ticking in somebody and what really they need to get out of a scenario. So that's a big deal to me, and that's maybe the biggest takeaway. Yeah. Yes, I know XP better than I. And as I was writing, hacking away at Ubuntu the other day. I mean, I know all those things, and I've learned those along the way. But it's the listening thing that I think is the most valuable amongst all of them.
Good. That's something I need to learn as well, especially now when I'm having guests on live streams. So it's part of the juggling of being the director of everything in the show. um, and in general, what are like the big challenges you see in this sector, and what techniques do you favor? Except, of course, TameFlow, which we know is the one you use mostly.
Uh, you know, obviously, I run across a ton of Scrum, and I do work in that. I am an adherent on, for some instances, on Safe, and I'm happy with that. I use the TameFlow technique. Again, it's all context based. There is no one silver bullet. I think, Rick, if there was anything that I would start people down the path on that everybody ought to think about, is systems thinking, and seeing the big picture, understanding that transforming an idea to value lives on a value chain, and they ought to be able to, whether it's starting at the Potter model, down the Porter model, Potter. I've been reading Harry Potter again, but down to an actual value stream. Those are things that are really important to understand, so that you can take the ideas of TameFlow. You can start thinking about the flow of work, and thinking about constraints, and thinking about why multitasking is an evil that has been foisted upon modern humankind. Those I think are the things that are the important techniques for post-COVID, and the struggles that we're going to have to, as leaders and people who make people's lives different. Those are the things that we're going to have to help people bring to bear. We can't bring them to bear for them, but we can help them bring those to bear.
Yeah. Okay. Now this whole industry, has developed a lot in the last 20, 25 years with Agile, and it's it has also been very, very polarizing, and you have the fundamentalists of whatever school of thought might be the one of the day. But I want to talk again about the TameFlow community. It's still very, very small. I know I probably know every person individually on the community, and this community side should be growing. How would you like such a community to develop? Because I think what makes a real difference is not only the merit of the method, but it's also the like human element, the people around the method, the people that share the ideas, and how they want to go about to share. So what would you like to see out of?
Well, that's you've actually hit the nail on the head and answered the question. So, if this were a lawyer, we would say, counsel, you've asked and answered the question for, but that's important, right? What you've suggested is exactly what I would want out of the community. It's the same thing that I think when you get involved in, and early on, I think that's exactly what was going on in the early part of the Agile community. There was a lot more, there was a lot fewer boundaries that had solidified around it and said, well, hey, if you're doing Scrum, you better be doing it this way, and you can't talk about flow, and you can't talk about throughput accounting at the same time you're doing that. You should be doing velocity, not throughput accounting. Those sorts of things. Having a community that shares information, that supports each other, has the conversations, and again, the conversations are good. They can be heated. They can be passionate. But they have to resolve in something where everyone can take something away. That's, I think, what I would want the TameFlow community to be and grow into. The more the merrier, the more the conversation. One of the things I've enjoyed as I've participated on as many of these as I can so far is the chat that goes along the side, right? and people like Nick, who was talking about different methodologies at the time or different frameworks. And I'm sitting there scribbling them down. Again, because we're all attempting to learn and extend and be not brighter or bigger people, but more learned. Because knowing something and understanding how something works is useful when you're trying to help somebody solve their own problem, right? So the more you can know, that the more you can help them explore where the boundaries are.
So, Tom, you've just described an ideal community. What can I say? Let's just build it. Let's make it happen.
Well, okay? I am going to join later today. I promise.
Yes, and usually I ask the last or next to last question: where can people get in touch with you on the community with the community handle? But in lack of that, where do they get in touch with you now?
All you have to do is stuff in my name, and you either get me or you get a politician from California who's on a city council. But software process and Measurementcast, there's www.spamcast.net. That's the URL to the physical podcast.
This one.
Yeah, and then the one you had up earlier is to the blog. So those are the most current: Twitter, T. Cagley, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So I have a problem, and it's called social media. But so those kind of places are the easy places, and very soon, because I'm teaching myself coding again, I will finally have the Tom Cagley and Associates website up again. So that I finally have to fix that myself rather than the person who did it before.
Well, hackers never die, so.
No, and we learn new languages.
Yes. Okay, Tom. I will ask you, what kind of questions would you like to ask me? But, I want to just go through a bit of the comments to see who is here. And, of course, we have the man, Daniel Bavon.
Daniel!
Hello, Daniel from Montreal. Then we have Nick from Orlando in the house. Welcome to the show, Nick. We have Doug, who's also here almost every day. Hello from sunny Atlanta. Doug, what does he say here? Make that a hello, yes.
You can say y'all. Hello, y'all.
Hello, yeah. Doug, sometimes during this series would love to hear your best Ellie Goldratt story. Oh, wow, yes. That's something to think about. Okay. Jersey, hello from Warsaw. Yes. Jitesh, hello from London. And here Nick says, you've met some heroes of mine, Tom.
Cool. Okay,
great. So let's now move over to, we have someone more popping in here. There's Anna Sikorska. Hello, Anna. And of course, Rudiger, he's here all the time. Hello, Rudiger, welcome back. Okay, so now in these many years, we've been talking about TameFlow on the Spamcast. What kind of questions do you have that I have not answered or not answered appropriately during these shows?
Well, how about perhaps let's start with one that I don't think I've asked yet, and it features pretty prominently in Tame Your Workflow. And so hopefully this doesn't take you too by surprise, because we didn't discuss this. The whole idea of multitasking, you spend a number of pages in the book describing why that's the best thing since anybody. Oh, no, that you didn't explain that it was the best thing, but why it was sort of an evil. So can you take us through that? Because that's, I think, not chapter one, but it's pretty close to the beginning, and I want to make sure I get that right when we get through the reread.
Okay, so I mean, there are many elements about multitasking. First of all, there is a certain level of endemic multitasking that cannot be avoided. There is some multitasking that is like positive because it contributes to the exchange of information, so it is part of the information flow. But there is a lot of multitasking that is absolutely not necessary. In TOC, we call that negative multitasking. And that multitasking is what we should try to eliminate. Unfortunately, the mental models, the prevailing mental models of managers in most organizations, which have been like educated in terms of cost accounting, have this idea that the more you employ your resources, the better things will the better things will turn out, and therefore they tend to overload the people, and not only is that bad enough, they also have this idea that, oh, we must be customer focused. That's correct, but that induces another negative behavior, which is to start working on the requests as soon as possible, because the idea is that, oh, we are so overloaded here that if we start late, we will be even later. So let's get this work into the work process sooner rather than later. But what does that do? It just increases multitasking even more, and things will be delayed even more. So there are many elements that induce the creation of negative multitasking, and all of them are really artificial. They are consequences of, as I always say, the mental models that push you to make certain decisions. And if you change the mental models to others that allow you to see things differently from a different perspective, you might make decisions that are more beneficial for the final outcome that you're looking for.
So why doesn't that just go away? I mean, and I think the treatment in the book is good from that point of view. I think if the Vacante books also go into some of the impact of expedites and starting focusing and starting rather than stopping. So I think all of that data suggests that we should all know that. Why do those mental models proliferate? Is what can we use how can we use TameFlow to help people recognize that that's a flawed mental model, and then move them to a more productive or a more effective mental model?
I think it has a lot to do with the notion of skin in the game, because the business side of companies have, of course, the desire to deliver whatever it is they are promising to the market as soon as possible. But getting the stuff done is kind of not their business. They don't have the skin in the game there. I don't want to revive the very bad story of the chicken and pigs. That's not what I am aiming at. I despise that story. I think it's one of the worst things that ever happened to this industry, and that has created divisiveness within the company. But the point I'm getting to, and that I have this thing of full kitting, which coming from like the manufacturing floor and its concept of having lean, will make you think that you need to prepare all the work before it gets released to the production line or to the software engineering team and so on and so forth. But full kitting is really something much more profound, because it is where you will create the meeting, so to say, between the business side and the technology side. And this is where you're creating the skin in the game, the missing skin of the game for the business side. What typically happens is that the expectation is that the engineering team will create the estimates or the forecasts. The question that Dan Vacanti has in his book, "When will it be done?" is prevailing. It's almost the only question that matters. But in full kitting, since we're trying to introduce the awareness of throughput, of financial throughput, I also hold the business side accountable for giving a value estimate of the work they are asking for. And if they are not willing to do that, I will escalate the issue all the way to the CEO and say, what game are you playing here? You're asking people to commit to stuff that you don't even know the value of. Is that sound business practice? Wouldn't it be better if you can evaluate the different options and make an economic decision? So that's where you get the moment that you can ask the business to be accountable to express this this value, and I think that makes a total difference. It's part of the full kit. I say the full kit. We just do not push it into the production line, so to say, unless it has a value number. So, dear business side, do your part, and then the engineering side will do their part. So we're trying to re-establish a balance between these unbalanced forces, business and technology, by making an economic argument, not an argument of like social justice and fairness and like equality in the workspace. It's a pure economic argument that holds the business side accountable for what they are asking for. And this is really important, because then you have two variables. One is the duration, which you can derive with estimation or preferably probabilistic forecasting. That's what I prefer. So you have one timeline, one time segment, and on the other side, on the other axis, rather than counting number of stories, so rather than counting the workload, we are counting the dollar load of that work. And those two variables, dollar over time, are representative of your financial throughput. And that is the basis for all exercises in selection and prioritization that we have in TameFlow. And therefore, you get to this point where, hey, tech is responsible for this axis and business is responsible for this axis. If you want the line there in the middle to go up, you both have to contribute your part. I don't know if this was an answer to your question, Tom.
Yes, it was, and a little bit more. So actually, that was helpful. And to be honest, I think it was not a different answer, but a different view into the whole idea of full kitting, which I think you talked about in Campfire number 2, perhaps, at least earlier this week. So, that was actually very helpful. This whole idea of performance and doing this stuff. So before I ask my next question, you've done this, right? So getting the business side to create value, to value the work before it goes in, so it's full kitted. How is implementing that actually felt like in an organization? How does that feel? And I know there are other practitioners in the chat. It'd be interesting to hear how making that step, how does that feel in terms of how organizations relate to it?
Well, it is often that you like experience or you see the people in the organization getting to that aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's one key element of the psychological flow that I'm working with, and I always want to get to the moment of what I call the enlightened self-interest. So we have this happening at the CEO level and all the way down to the most recent junior hire. It's integral part in creating like the unity of purpose pattern, and when I see that aha moment happens, of course on the basis of some new understanding that they have acquired, some new notion, but primarily you see it like the lightening up on the face that it's, oh yes, this is good for me. So it's the self-interest part that comes back into like the perspective. People are often like detached from all process improvement initiatives and transformations. There is a lot of fatigue about this because you finish one and didn't work, you try the next one, and it's just draining. But you get to that moment where they see, oh yes, this is interesting because it means I can work less because I'm not Herbie. It means I will make more money because I'm using throughput accounting. It means we will have less conflicts because we're all tied together by the unity of purpose. So that I think is the most rewarding moment when the enlightened self-interest happens. By the way, I see Daniel is pushing in a question here.
Yeah, I saw that. And that was actually that was my third question. So let's just dive into Daniel's question.
Yeah, what's the difference between wait time and idle time? It's the subject. The wait time is the work. The work is waiting, and idle time is the worker who is like sitting there and doing nothing. That's how I define it.
Can we throw touch time in there too?
Touch time is when both get together, when the worker is touching the work, or the doctor is operating on the patient. So it's productive time. But beware, this is where the throughput accounting aspect comes in. Wait time is always bad. It's reducing performance. But idle time is not always bad. In fact, idle time is necessary. In TameFlow, we know that we have to keep Herbie always busy, but we also use drum buffer rope so that the guy in front doesn't run away, which means that the guy in front has to either walk much slower or even stop and stand still and wait for Herbie to catch up. Now, when in the workplace do you see someone who like explicitly shows that he or she is not working? No, never. Why? Because of cost accounting. Hey, Tom, we pay your salary, you better be working, right? That unless you are the constraint, that work you're doing is just producing damage. So that's the difference between idle time from a cost accounting perspective, where you're wasting economic resources, and idle time from a throughput accounting perspective, where unless you're Herbie, where your idle time is there to support Herbie.
Cool, interesting.
By idle time, you are ensuring that you do not leave Herbie alone in the wood. Okay?
And you, as the scoutmaster, you can't get to the picture tents and say, well, hey, Herbie didn't make it. Explain that to their parents.
Okay, so we have Nick here saying something. How long till enlightenment? I read that the brain needs 21 days to embed a concept. What is your experience? Well, it might be a matter of insisting and telling the story of Herbie over and over again until you get to the 22nd day, and then maybe there is like an aha moment. But sometime, if you make it like more personal, more directly engaging, you need much less, and this happens typically if you are familiar with TOC. The moment I see this mostly is when there are conflicts and you're using like the evaporating cloud, where people can realize that if we have a shared goal, there is no conflict that cannot be resolved. So that is a very powerful tool. The evaporating cloud is like a catalyst that makes this reaction happen much faster. And then there are many other elements of psychological flow that come in there. But this is not only a matter of absorbing a concept, so that you need like the learner's repetition, 21 days or whatever it is. It has also a lot to do with the emotional commitment, the emotional load that you're producing by making certain decisions or other decisions. And often, or if it is a manager that has this moment of enlightened self-interest, that's where I talk about inspired leadership. When management starts making decisions differently and the people experience that those decisions are tangibly beneficial for them, of course they will start moving. They will start moving with no delay. So what else here? Daniel, wait time equal high resource efficiency. Mostly yes, because then you have work waiting for people, which means people are busy, and therefore the cost accountant is happy. Of course, Daniel is a cost accountant at heart, so he will always suggest this. Daniel again, idle time equal high flow efficiency. Yes, of course, because then we have people waiting for work, and that ensures that the work never stops. It's the whole point of one piece flow. In one piece flow, the piece should never stop flowing. It's the flow that is the unitary. It's not the single piece, as many believe. I always use the metaphor of the patient in the hospital. Once you take the patient into the surgery room, you don't want to interrupt the operation to, I don't know, go and take care of some other patient, or take a break or whatever. Once the operation starts, you keep on going until it's done. And that's how you should handle work in knowledge work. Once you start, don't interrupt. Go on until it's done. And then maybe take a break because you deserve it. But don't.
Oh, come on. Expedited work should be accepted into all processes at all times. So your surgeon, if he's working on your heart, ought to take, have to jump out and do an appendix perhaps, or somebody's tonsils.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be really good.
That makes it no tangible. Imagine you are that patient. What is your self-best interest?
Yeah.
Okay, Daniel is keeping on doing these riddles with wait time. So the next one we have here, wait time is high work in process. Yes, for the same reason, because work is waiting, so it must stand still somewhere and it accumulates. Nick, I think less time is those people who have already thought about it. Well, I'm
That's
not
back
sure.
to the 21 days thing. I
Yeah,
also
okay.
think that, getting people to actually work through things tangibly is a good adult learning concept that helps shorten the mental acceptance, or at least the parsing of it. So not only giving them the theory, but giving them practice and let them go through an exercise where they tangibly learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah, I think, I mean, experiential learning is always very powerful, but then you also have the uh, problem of choosing the right exercises. And there
Oh
are many
yeah.
exercises out there which are valuable, but might also not promote uh, the mental models that are really significant.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's important to create like the right simulations and games. And as you know, we're also hopefully sometime getting this TameFlow simulation game out of the door.
Cool.
We have Jersey, who says, which stories or games or other stuff can you recommend to be used when working with CEOs to make him get to that enlightenment? No, with CEOs you don't play games. With CEOs you show them numbers. It's so simple. So you have to come up with an existing case and show them. Let's rewind history. Imagine that you had taken this decision instead. And the first thing he will say, no, I will never take that decision because costs will be unbearable. Uh, but you show him, no, the bottom line is this. Do you want to know how we get to that point? And then you show. So, but of course, if you are in the position to, in a friendly way, invite a CEO to some simulation, then that's part of having that experiential learning that even is beneficial even for CEOs. But I don't count on that. With CEOs, you just show numbers. That's what they reason about. Doug, I hate to say it, but most of my experience has indicated that many of the business folks aren't much better at estimating value than engineers are at estimating duration. Absolutely right. And for the same reason, you should use more quantitative methods or processes like QFD and ISO 16, whatever that standard is. So there are ways to make that evaluation a bit more scientific. But the first step is let them feel that they are co-responsible for the mess that exists in the companies. It's not only engineering that is not able to deliver on time and that are slacking off all the time. That is the first step. Create the awareness that, hey guys, business guys, you are part of a team. We have a common shared goal. You have a backpack you have to carry, and until now it's been lying down on the ground. No one is taking care of it. You should. Then we can see, if they pick up the backpack, we can see if they become somehow better at
Before
that.
you go on, I actually have a story that proves that they can get better. So, once upon a time, and one of the few firms that I've ever seen that got really good at estimating value, or at least predicting value, was Dow Chemical up in Midland, Michigan, which is now underwater. But what they did was they required for any program, any large thing, that before they started, they would get an estimate of value for it. The business had to commit to that estimate of value. They wrote it down and put it as an addendum into their annual report to shareholders, and immediately so if it said in 3 years we're going to have $1,000 million worth of revenue, they went, and 3 years from now they put it into the ledger already, so that the business would commit it. Said we're going to save this much money. They would then take that out of their budget, physically do it. And there wasn't a negotiation after that, right? You had to get it right. And they got much closer. And therefore it stopped being, when they would do these values, like Doug, and I agree with Doug, they're generally bad at it, because there's no consequence to getting it wrong, to not spending time and effort to think about it. And again, you can still get it wrong, but a lot of times it's prima facie, right? You just do it, check the box, and you go from there, and no one cares.
I think that's exactly what I meant when I said use the expression to have skin on the game.
In the game, absolutely.
Yeah. So you know, if you get it wrong, you will have some sort of consequence. So that helps to get the inspired, enlightened self-learning. Doug, again, that estimate of value is key in Reinert's cost of delay, but if the value estimate is crap, then bad decisions will be made. Yes, of course, it's the old GIGO, you know, garbage in, garbage out, and that is just one more reason to get better at that. And we can just hold business accountable for getting better at estimates, just like they want the developers to get better at estimates, or learn other ways to assess this value. Nick, experiential learning is great, even so time is needed. That's when patience kicks in as well. Thanks for the answers. Yes, so you need time, and that is a major problem. Because why? Because companies are overloaded. Hey, we can't waste 5 hours for a simulation. We have work to do here. So you know, it's a perverse cycle. A vicious, perverse cycle. You won't get out of it. You need to have someone who gets inside the company gets the enlightened self-interest and is like the spark that ignites this and has the either the power or the personality to make space for these exercises, a sponsor, if you wish. Okay, Daniel is asking for his own show. We need a campfire on ROI, COD, and throughput rate. Yes, Daniel, we'll put you on the stage. Don't worry, your time will come. And Nick confirms, yes, Daniel. Rudiger, but that assumes those people's managers will still be there in 3 years. Very, very good point. I mean, that's the carousel of people coming and going, and that's why it becomes so important to have this shared mental model across the board, from the CEO to, as I say, the junior hire, so that when someone is replaced, these things are like embedded, endemic in the system, and any new manager wanting to reintroduce old ways of working would have to face a lot of resistance. But yes, that is clearly a problem, and therefore what I suggest is that the people in charge, the managers in charge, must start in a way to do like a continuity program, so that if they leave or are replaced, the methods learned by the organization can get a fighting chance to keep on going. So that's part of feeding the unity of purpose, to the point that if I'm leaving this place, I still want the people who are there to get to the base camp, right? Nick, I have a question for an upcoming campfire, if no time today. What time is it, by the way? Oh, we're running out of time. It's about unbalanced, non-constrained resources and how that shows up in TameFlow at all. Yeah, that's quite a question, and I think we definitely reserve that for another time. Okay, Tom, we've gone through some questions here, but before we wrap this up, is there anything else you would like to do? Hey, no, wait a minute, Tom. You know, if you wake up one morning and you get a hot cup of caffeinated drink, and you could have, what is it, three desires, two desires? Two. um, to make this this industry better, what would those be?
I think everyone should listen to actually hear, not ask questions, and read. Things like TameFlow, definitely top of the list, but read everything that one can get one's hands on.
Okay, very good. So, Tom, thank you very much for being guest on the Campfire Talks with Herbie. I'm sure we will have more conversations on spamcasts or campfires. And of course, I'm really curious to see how the reread goes. And we'll keep
Absolutely.
in touch.
Super. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, the audience. And we will be soon back on this channel next week. So we're ending off now. Goodbye.